Hi, welcome back to 14ers 101, your guide to getting ready for hiking your first 14er. I'm Leigh, and this video is part 2 on gear, and I'll be focusing on the 10 essential systems. In this video, I'm going to give you a little history about the 10 essentials and then dive into each of the systems. With each system, I'll talk about their importance in the field, go over some different options you can consider, and tips for keeping it budget friendly. Now, we did cover some of these topics in the last video on hiking basics. I won't dive as deep into those categories in this video, but I will take a quick look at them through the lens of their purpose as a part of the 10 essentials. So, what exactly are the 10 essential systems and what are they for? You may have heard of the 10 essential systems or the 10 essentials before. The idea of the 10 essentials has been around since the 1930s with some revamping over the years. They were originally published in the book, Mountaineering Freedom of the Hills, a highly regarded book among mountaineers. In Mountaineering the Freedom of the Hills, the editors explained that the purpose of this list has always been to answer two basic questions. First, can you respond positively to an accident or emergency? Second, can you safely spend a night or more out? Spending an unplanned night out on a mountain doesn't happen a lot, especially on more beginner routes, but it can happen. If someone gets lost or injured on a 14er to the point that they need a rescue, it's very possible that they'll be stuck out in the wilderness for several hours or overnight. Sometimes a hiking plan goes sideways and you won't make it back to the trailhead before it gets dark, and it might be a wiser choice to stay put for the night rather than to try to navigate unknown terrain in the darkness. The 10 Essentials, which was originally a list of 10 specific items, were updated to systems in 2003. Each system is essentially a category, and you choose items that will fit the purpose of each category. These systems are navigation, illumination, sun protection, first aid, repair kit and tools, fire, shelter, food, water, and insulation. While you may only use a few of these items on most of your hikes, that doesn't mean they aren't useful or necessary to consider having with you. You may never fully appreciate the value of having your 10 essentials until you find yourself in an emergency and really need one of them. While we never hope to end up stuck out on a hike overnight for any reason, it does happen. And if you find yourself in that situation, you'll be really glad you prepared. Navigation is the first system. You'll want to have with you some sort of tool that you know how to use to help you find your way in the wilderness. While the majority of the easier routes on Colorado's 14ers have pretty distinct trails and often have a lot of other people on them to help point the way, not all mountains have a clear path the entire way. Trails can be especially difficult to follow in rocky terrain, which is common on 14ers. If you were to find yourself separated from your group, or if you were hiking alone and nobody else was around, you should be prepared to navigate yourself down the mountain. Route descriptions and navigational tools are both used for the navigation system. Route descriptions are written descriptions, sometimes with pictures, of your trail or route. Lots of people will print these descriptions with the pictures to take with them on their hike. Some people choose to use route descriptions in a digital format and download them to your phones, but you want to make sure you have a power bank if you do that. Navigational tools include a GPS device or a map and compass. Many people use their phones as a GPS device with a navigation app such as Gaia or CalTopo. The pros to this option are that you have a variety of apps suitable for navigation to choose from, many of them with acceptable free versions, and most of us already have a phone that we could use for this purpose. The cons are that service is often unavailable at trailheads and along trails. You often have to pay for apps to be able to download the maps. Navigating with your phone can drain the battery, and cold weather can also cause electronics to die very quickly. Some people use a dedicated GPS device. These devices can be very reliable in terms of functionality and usually have a really good battery life, plus they usually have an SOS button for emergencies. However, these devices can be expensive to purchase, plus you typically have to purchase an ongoing subscription to the service provider of the device on top of the initial purchase. Another option is to carry a map and compass. The upside to this is there are no batteries needed, plus a map and compass are very lightweight. Maps are as accessible as a printer since you can print free custom maps from websites like CalTopo. The con here is that you actually need to know how to use a map and a compass, so you may need to take a navigation class to learn. Also, if you're in windy or snowy conditions, that can affect your ability to read your map and compass effectively. With a compass, as with any of these items, it's not worth carrying if you don't know how to use it. It'll just be extra weight. If you get really into hiking 14ers, a map and compass is a great backup option for navigation, so it may be worth taking a class at some point. Making copies, physical or digital, of route descriptions is a method many people use and would only cost as much as the paper you print it on if you're choosing to have hard copies. You might want to put your pages in a big Ziploc bag to help keep them dry. Using 14ers.com and the corresponding app for descriptions of routes on Colorado's peaks is free. I'll be talking more about planning your routes and using route descriptions in a future video on trip planning. For navigational tools, as a beginner, it's not necessary to go out and buy an expensive GPS device and a subscription for your first high peak. If you know how to use a map and compass, that's a great option for keeping it low cost. Compasses are relatively inexpensive, and you can print free custom maps of your hike from the internet with a service like caltopo.com. If you're unfamiliar with navigating using a compass, you can also use the option of utilizing your phone in a navigation app. If you go this route, it will be important that you have a battery pack for your phone though, and one powerful enough to charge your phone a couple of times. If you don't have one, try to borrow one from a friend. Otherwise, that might be something that would be wise to invest in. You'll also want to see if you can download the map with your GPX file to your phone so you can view it even if you don't have service. The next system is Illumination. It's not uncommon to end up hiking in the dark on high peaks. Most often, this is because you may be starting your hike in the dark for an early alpine start in order to avoid common afternoon thunderstorms. You may also be finishing in the dark if you've planned accordingly, if your hike went longer than expected, or if you're dealing with an emergency situation in the field. Long story short for illumination, use a headlamp. Headlamps are the go-to in the mountains. They're hands-free and generally lightweight. If you don't have a headlamp, a flashlight can work. It's less convenient because you have to hold it, meaning your hands aren't free to use trekking poles or to catch yourself if you trip or stumble. Also, a flashlight is probably heavier than a headlamp. Whatever you use, make sure to carry an extra set of fresh batteries. Light output for these items is measured in lumens, a measure of the amount of visible light emitted by a source per unit of time. There's a lot of different recommendations on lumen output for hikers. If you're planning on hiking in the dark, it's recommended to have a light source of somewhere between 250 to 500 lumens to be able to hike at a normal pace. Some headlamps come with multiple brightness settings so you can adjust as you hike. Others come with a red light option. In the dark, looking at bright lights can ruin our night vision. Certain types of red light don't have the same effect. I like to use the red light function on my headlamp if I'm camping out at a trailhead, either for making a trip to the bathroom in the middle of the night or when I'm getting dressed before heading out on the hike. Now, a headlamp doesn't need to be expensive. You can check out the local sporting goods store or even something like Walmart to find relatively inexpensive headlamps. Check out the lumen output though, as you don't want something that won't be bright enough to hike by. As mentioned, flashlights are an option as well, they just have a few more cons. I don't recommend relying on your phone's flash as your source of illumination. Not only does this tie up your hands having to carry a device that you really don't want to drop, it also will rapidly drain your phone's battery. Sun protection, the next system, is really important at altitude. We all know that the sun's rays are damaging, and they are even more so at higher elevations. Research suggests that for every 1,000 feet in elevation you ascend, the sun's UV rays intensify by 8 to 10% due to the thinning of the atmosphere. This means that at the highest elevations in Colorado, the sun's UV rays can be over twice as intense as at sea level. Here are some things you can do to protect yourself from the sun. Sunscreen. Use at least SPF 30 and apply it frequently, usually every 60 to 90 minutes. Sunglasses. Snow blindness is a term for what is essentially sunburning your eyes, and you don't have to be on snow for it to happen. Excessive UV exposure to your eyes can result in a temporary loss of vision and eye pain, so you definitely want to protect your eyes from the sun. SPF chapstick. Sunburned and chapped lips are incredibly uncomfortable. Wide-brimmed hat. There are a lot of different hat styles out there that can protect you from the sun. I carry a normal trucker-style hat, but there are hats with brims all the way around, as well as hats that even have an extra flap of fabric on the back to cover your neck. Sun hoodie. A sun hoodie is one of my favorite pieces of gear. Sun hoodies are made up of lightweight, breathable fabric that has UV-resistant qualities. They have long sleeves and usually a big hood that can cover up your neck and ears. A good sun hoodie does tend to run on the expensive side. If you hike a lot, this is an item that I personally think is worth the cost. Keeping yourself protected from the sun is important, but it doesn't need to cost much. Sunscreen isn't too expensive, but it's wise to pick up a sport version that's sweat resistant. You don't need to buy a special hat. A baseball cap is fine, but just know that it's probably going to get pretty sweaty and gross, so you probably don't want to take your favorite cap. Same with sunglasses. Anything you have around the house will work fine, and if you don't have any, you can pick up a cheap pair at a convenience store. If you have a lightweight long sleeve shirt you can use as a base layer, it can also double as protection from the sun. It's worth picking up some SPF chapstick if you don't have any. Sunscreen on your lips is kind of gross, but you want to make sure you don't end up with sunburned lips either. The fourth system is first aid. We covered this item pretty thoroughly in the first video on gear. And because your first aid kit is already an item designed for unexpected emergencies, we don't really need to add anything here. So you can check out part 1 if you missed it to see my recommendations for first aid. The fifth system is repair kit and tools. It happens. A strap breaks on your backpack, a shoelace snaps, or a buckle breaks. These things can be anywhere from a minor inconvenience to a big problem. Having just a few extra helpful items in your backpack can help you MacGyver a solution in the field if needed. With this system, it's wise to think about what you can carry that will serve multiple functions. Some sort of multi-tool is pretty standard. Some multi-tools are simple and lightweight with only a couple of features like a blade, some scissors, and a screwdriver. Others are more complex and could have multiple blades, nail files, tweezers, bottle openers, and other tools. The more featured your multi-tool, the heavier it will be. Some other repair supplies might include things like shoelaces or duct tape, which have a wide variety of applications for repairs. A length of paracord is also a lightweight piece of gear with a lot of potential uses. People will generally adjust their repair kit supplies to match the type of trip that they're on. For example, backpackers tend to carry different repair supplies than day hikers, as they have different gear they're depending on for a successful trip. For a day trip on a 14er, I generally carry a simple multi-tool, duct tape, shoelaces, paracord, some hair ties, and extra batteries for my headlamp. If you know how to use a needle and thread, some people include those in their repair kits too. You might already have some items around the house that you can use for this system. If you don't already have a simple multi-tool, it's easy to pick up a relatively inexpensive, lightweight option from a general store or someplace like Walmart for less than $10. An extra shoelace or a length of paracord can be an inexpensive purchase as well. REI sells a 30-foot length of paracord for like $7. Duct tape is usually something we all have around, but we don't really want to carry a big roll of duct tape in our packs. While you can buy mini rolls of duct tape designed for backpacking, you can make your own mini roll. If you take a small piece of cardboard in any size that you want, you can wrap duct tape around it. Much more convenient to carry in your pack. I've also seen people wrap duct tape on their ski poles or trekking poles. The next system is fire. This is definitely more for emergency situations if you're just doing a day trip. But if you get stuck out overnight for any reason, a fire may be needed for warmth, and in some cases it can also be a signal to rescuers. There are a lot of options out there for carrying items for the fire system in your pack. What you use will depend on what kind of trip you're planning and how much weight you're willing to carry. Some options include matches, a lighter, flint and steel, tinder, and a camp stove. If you carry emergency matches, it's wise to consider getting some waterproof or stormproof matches. A lighter is another option for getting a flame quickly, but know that these can also be difficult to light in windy or cold conditions. You'll also want to make sure to carry one that's not low on fuel. Flint and steel, or a fire striker, is another option. A fire striker is a piece of carbon steel that is struck with the edge of a specific type of rock to create sparks. This is definitely a piece of gear you'd want to practice making fires with if you wanted to use it. You might also choose to carry some form of tinder to help you start a fire. There are a lot of different types of tinder available, and there are DIY options too. Sometimes other emergency items, like the emergency bivvy I carry, come with a length of cord that's designed to double as tinder. This might be something you consider if there's a lot of rain in the forecast or if you're hiking in a particularly wet climate. There's a pretty thorough article on theprepared.com covering the best tinder for survival fires. I thought it was an interesting read, so I'll link it below in the description. Some people will carry a camp stove for a day hike and indulge themselves in hot drinks or warm meals along their hike. There's nothing wrong with that if that's what you want to do. It just adds weight to your pack and you'll still need something to light the stove. The easiest way to keep this one cheap is probably just to carry a lighter, as you can pick them up just about anywhere if you don't already have one. Survival or emergency matches also aren't very expensive. I wouldn't recommend a regular matchbook, as those can be pretty flimsy and unreliable, especially if they were to get wet. The seventh system is shelter. If we're thinking about needing to spend an unexpected night out on a mountain, having some way of sheltering yourself from the elements can make your night much less uncomfortable. For day trips, this means we're thinking about an emergency form of shelter. This might include an emergency tarp, blanket, or bivvy. Tarps are bigger and heavier items, and they can typically be wrapped around you to keep you drier and warmer, or set up like a tent cover to create a dry and protected place to sleep. This would be a heavier duty emergency item. Emergency blankets are intended to wrap around your body and help reflect your body heat back towards you to retain warmth. These are generally very small and lightweight, but they can be pretty flimsy. Emergency bivvies are kind of like a cocoon that you can crawl inside of, and it reflects your body heat back towards you. They're lighter than tarps and more durable than emergency blankets. They come in a wide variety of sizes, styles, and weights, and you crawl into them to keep you warmer and protect you from the elements. I started off carrying a tarp and some emergency blankets that I'd been given as a part of a class. Later, I purchased an emergency bivvy, smaller and lighter than the tarp, warmer and sturdier than the blankets, and I spent less than $20 on it. Unless you already do outdoor activities on the regular, it's unlikely you have some form of emergency shelter around your house. You may need to go and purchase something for your hike or borrow something from an outdoorsy friend to cover this system. If you want to pick something up for yourself, most of these items can be relatively inexpensive, even at a gear store. I'd suggest starting with an emergency blanket or two. You can buy a 4-pack on Amazon for less than $10, and they definitely can make a cold night out a little more bearable. Yes, it's unlikely that you'll need this item on your first 14er hike, but an emergency blanket is so small and lightweight, it won't hurt to have in your pack just in case. The next system is food. I covered nutrition suggestions for hiking in the last video on hiking basics. But when you're thinking about food for an emergency situation, the only thing I would add is that it's wise to carry a little extra food on your hike. It can make an unplanned night out a bit more comfortable. If you're out for a cold night, eating can actually help keep you warm. Water is next, and again, we covered this in part 1. Water, however, is more important in an emergency situation than food is. As the saying goes, you can survive weeks without food, but only days without water. When I'm hiking 14ers, I'm always thinking about what I can do if I run out of water. It's unwise to drink water directly from a stream if you run out, unless you're really desperate. Streams are frequently contaminated with bacteria, viruses, and parasites that can cause waterborne disease. There are lots of different tools you can carry with you to help you if you run out of water and there's a water source nearby. One option is to filter your water. There are lots of different options of filters, like pump filters, squeeze filters, and gravity filters. Some filters are bigger and heavier, and some styles are very small and lightweight. Some water bottles even come with a built-in filter. You can also carry something like a life straw, which allows you to drink directly from a stream through a filtered straw. In my experience, though, these are pretty difficult to drink through. Another option is to treat your water chemically. This option is lightweight and small, however, you typically have to wait anywhere from 30 minutes to 4 hours for most chemical treatments to be effective. Items like the SteriPen are also an option. This uses UV light to kill pathogens in your water. Finally, it's always an option to boil your water. The easiest way to do this is with some sort of camp stove, which is used more frequently in backpacking situations or on winter trips as you can melt snow. The CDC recommends boiling water for 3 minutes at altitudes above 6,500 feet to sterilize for drinking. I'm often doing bigger hikes where I want more than 3 liters of water, so I like to try to plan to filter along the way if there are reliable water sources. I recently started using the Sawyer Micro Squeeze filter. It's really small and light and definitely effective for filtering a liter or 2 of water at a time. If you're planning on carrying all of your water, and just want something for emergencies, chemical treatment might be the way to go, as it's probably the cheapest option, plus it's small and lightweight. To keep this budget friendly, if you don't already have something you can use, you might have an outdoorsy friend with a filter that they might be willing to lend you. If you're able to borrow something, make sure you know how to use it properly, and test it out ahead of time. If you need to invest in something, chemical treatments are the cheapest emergency option, with options that run less than $10. Just make sure you know how to use whatever you bring. The final system is insulation, a topic also covered in the last video on hiking basics. The only thing I'd like to point out here is that you might want to consider some extra layers, such as a beanie, extra pair of socks, some gloves, and an extra insulating layer. Some small items that will help keep you warm if you find yourself stuck out overnight. So that covers the 10 essential systems. While the easier 14ers are fairly straightforward, accidents can still happen. Sometimes people unexpectedly have to spend a night out on the mountain due to getting off route. Other times people find themselves in need of a rescue, perhaps from getting lost, injured, sick, or just being unprepared for the conditions. In the description below, I've cultivated a collection of stories. Stories where people talk about unexpected events on their hikes and how they handled those situations. Some of these people are grateful that they had certain items with them for emergencies. Others wish they'd been carrying a few more items. The point of reading these stories is not to discourage you from hiking a 14er. On the contrary, the goal is for you to learn from the mistakes of others and hopefully avoid making similar mistakes. I hope you'll take some time to read through some of these stories. I also encourage you to take your time thinking through each of the 10 essential systems and thinking about what you'd want to carry in order to feel prepared on the mountain. Keep an eye out for the last video on gear, where I'll go over extra items worth considering and give you some final thoughts on gear philosophy. Good luck and get out there.